I've been reading too many people fighting and arguing about stupid shit to the point where I'm starting to develop theories, and I don't want to.
I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state.
Who actually runs the government?
Not who you think it is.
Here's the thing. A lot of people come to Washington and they just play the game. And it's you punch their ticket and get along to go along.
She killed her dog and bragged about it in her book. The prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones. The investigators will be investigated because the deep state, last term for President Trump, they were hiding in the shadows, but now they have a spotlight on them.
People, we need to stop trusting the experts. Right?
There are many strange ideas that influence the Trump administration, and the tech oligarchy and their network states, that's just one of them. On the other side of that coin is something that is maybe stranger, if you believe that that is possible. So strange that it's been really hard for me to work out a meaningful way to talk about it. I'm talking about the thinking that is related to Steve Bannon, what motivated the Jan 6s, the true believers who think that God selected Donald Trump to save America.
I think he's been sent from above.
I believe he is a gift from God that's trying to save our country.
This thinking, it's not religious necessarily, but it is kind of esoteric. And the best concept that I have found to help me understand it is the occult. Don't click away. Please just give me 2 minutes. 2 minutes to explain what I mean before you just dismiss this out of hand, because I'm not using that word to conjure ideas of conspiracy or evil or anything like that. Historically, the occult has been understood as rejected knowledge. Things that we once believed and respected, but over time, as science has progressed, they've fallen out of fashion and our society just doesn't really endorse them anymore. Obviously, there have been periods where a lot of things fell out of fashion, like the scientific revolution. But the thing about this rejected knowledge is, despite being disproven, despite most people moving on to other forms of knowledge, some of these ideas hang on. They retain a following. You probably encounter numerous kinds of rejected knowledge in your day-to-day life. Astrology, homeopathy, Ayurveda, conspiracy theories, feng shui, crystals, heavy metals, Dianetics, acupuncture, I could go on. But what often accompanies these beliefs is a rejection of the prevalent authorities and the institutions of the day, and a rejection of the empirical methods that they use to validate their findings, because in their mind, only one can be right. Let's start with the man that led me down this very dark and twisted rabbit hole, RFK Jr. How on earth did this man end up as the Secretary of Health when he believes so many unscientific things?
I do believe that autism does come from vaccines. They're going to have the right to compel unwanted medical interventions on us. The Nazis did that in the camps. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. They're putting in 5G to harvest our data and control our behavior.
Things that we know, based on empirical testing, are not true. He believes vaccines cause autism, antidepressants cause mass shootings, fluoride in the water causes lower IQ and brittle bones, chemicals in our food are responsible for gender confusion, seed oils cause obesity, AIDS is caused by poppers at raves, and Wi-Fi is destroying our mitochondria and giving us all cancer. All of the beliefs that I have listed require a rejection of modern science in order to believe, or just a flat-out rejection of modernity, a belief that things were simpler in the past, they were better then. But when you reject the empirical evidence and institutions that support scientific development, you are forced to reject a bunch of other things too. When you go to the part of the world where people who love to drink raw milk are, you will start to hear a lot of other weird ideas. In that pile of rejected knowledge, things amalgamate, because the institution that rejected my idea also rejected this idea. So maybe I should give this idea a second chance. Your yoga group suddenly starts questioning the efficacy of vaccines, and then your anti-vax group starts to question the moon landing. And before you know it, your circle is talking about the deep state.
Donald Trump, our United States president, is a massive and powerful light worker. The information that I am providing today is coming from the Galactic Federation of Light. That's what the humans call these beings.
Any skepticism towards one idea might force you to apply the same questioning attitude to your own beliefs. So these ideas start reinforcing one another, even though most of the time they have very little to do with one another. And the goals of the people who endorse the different projects tend to be very different. All of these ideas that have failed to gain or maintain mainstream recognition come together to create this taboo irrationalism that in a historical context is understood as the occult. The occult then creates a kind of counter-establishment, a more singular thought pattern that wants to rebel against the status quo and become a home for the alienated. Anyone who doesn't feel represented by the establishment or the established social order may look to this alternative and turn to rejected knowledge to validate their denunciation of the mainstream. A lot of poor people who find the Make America Great Again, rejection of progress slogan appealing, they're vulnerable to these kinds of belief. They don't want to face their own powerlessness. They don't want to believe that this is just happening to them. So they turn to these alternative knowledge spaces to have a sense of control, to believe that there is some divine purpose or that a miracle will happen that will fix everything. But there is another category of people who tend to dabble in the occult or have a preference for rejected knowledge, the rich and the bored. The issues of the everyday man don't affect them. There's little in their life that can affect them because, well, they're wealthy, which actually can make life a little bit boring. In order to feel important and interesting, they want to pretend that they are part of some bohemian underground intelligentsia. And of course they want to believe that they are greater and more powerful and more in control than modern science insists that they are. Just an average human like everybody else. When there is a lot of political disillusionment and institutional distrust, members of this counter-establishment can force their way into mainstream politics. That can be through creating a new party or reshaping an existing party. Ultimately, it's whatever is the path of least resistance. Politics, based on rejected knowledge, does tend to have a religious complexion. Advocates claim that they have ideals much greater than the day-to-day concerns of the state. Forget social services or infrastructure, they have spiritual sounding goals like salvation and redemption. This is an illuminated politics.
You talk about the country, you believe you have more to do. You weren't done. You were spared for a reason.
Well, God believes that, I guess. We'll have to see.
Trump has frequently said that he believes in the power of positive thinking.
Think of yourself as a winner. The power of positive thinking.
If he meant an optimistic outlook on life, I'd be right on board. But he means something a little bit more serious than that. When talking about the people who've shaped him as a person, Trump only ever names two people: his late father and his Reverend, Norman Vincent Peale.
You know, the greatest speaker I think I've ever witnessed was Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. And he would speak the power of positive thinking.
Trump started attending Peale's sermons as a child in the 1950s and remained a devoted parishioner for more than 50 years, marrying two of his wives in Peale's church. This isn't casual, tick-it-off-the-list church attendance. Trump likes this church, and he likes this reverend. And it was in this church, through this reverend, that Donald Trump was introduced to the power of positive thinking. The power of positive thinking comes from something called New Thought. New Thought is a religious movement that started in America in the early 19th century and basically created a bunch of spiritual Frankenstein's monsters. It all started with a man named Phineas Quimby, who convinced people that he could heal them using something called mind power. New Thought endorses the idea that your mind directly influences reality. Not the whole attitude is everything, perspective is everything shtick. No, you can think things into being, that you can make things happen with the power of your mind alone.
In any moment, your life can re-begin itself with a new thought.
I believe that our words have creative power, and they start with thoughts.
God said, let us make man in our image and likeness. What was the intention? That we would create with the words of our mouth.
It gave us the freedom to use our mind, to use our thought, to allow the creative power within us to create a new life.
Because we know our thoughts have power.
We create with the words of our mouth an atmosphere that either attracts God or it causes God not to be drawn into our situation.
All of these people are still very much Christian. The proverb, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, is heavily stretched to mean that every person's creative mind has the same creative force as God. These ideas started in relation to health, and we definitely still see them there today, but soon they evolved into a focus on self-improvement and material abundance. So what started with a random clockmaker, Phineas Quimby, resulted in Christian Science, the prosperity gospel.
I've always been your debt freedom.
and the power of positive thinking.
Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, from many years ago, wrote a book, The Power of Positive Thinking.
In that book, he says that any fact facing us, however difficult, even seemingly hopeless, is not so important as our attitude toward that fact. Confident and optimistic thought pattern can modify or overcome the fact altogether. These are the instructions that Peale gives to his followers, and I think they actually also provide an alternative framing for Trump's consistent and outrageous lies. Have we ever considered that Trump might be manifesting?
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning.
Nobody else can do it like me.
Nobody even understands it but me.
Nobody knows debt better than me.
Nobody builds walls better than me.
Nobody knows much more about technology than I do.
Nobody knows the system better than me.
Nobody in the history of this country has ever known so much about infrastructure as Donald Trump. There's nobody bigger or better at the military than I am. I know more about grass than any human being, I think, anywhere in the world. Nobody's ever had crowds like this, nobody, ever. I know more formulas. I know words, I have the best words. I have an instinct for this kind of thought. I understand things, I comprehend very well. Better than, I think, almost anybody.
I'm not saying he's manifesting as in it is working, because I am saying that when Trump says all of these crazy things, maybe his motivation is more spiritual. When Trump told his press secretary to announce that his Inauguration Day crowd was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe, was he lying? Or did he think he was affirming? I think it's important to understand because of the relationship between different kinds of rejected knowledge. I told you how it cross-contaminates and how strong belief in one thing makes you more susceptible to another. So if Donald Trump truly believes in the power of positive thinking, he is susceptible to other far more dangerous forms of rejected knowledge. Well, no spoilers, but there is a very scary piece of rejected knowledge that exists close to the White House, and it is coming at him from a lot of different angles. But let me show you the connection between these two ideas using another group who are at the forefront of culture right now. Men. The power of positive thinking is not some special tool used exclusively by Trump. You don't need me to tell you that. In America, it's everywhere. The law of attraction, The Secret, affirmations, manifestation, how to win friends and influence people. The self-help industry is bigger than it has ever been, and recently it got a whole new audience. As men face a growing number of challenges in society, whether it be in relationships or economic hardship or education struggles, mental health concerns, the self-help industry has not skipped a beat in delivering young men some questionable reassurance. Something that will give them the illusion of control, that will make them feel like they have an understanding of how the world works. A cultural home outside of the establishment that they feel has abandoned them. The Manosphere and related masculinity influencer content is extremely solution-oriented. And one of the big solutions that they push, positive thinking, manifestation, and the law of attraction.
Right now, in this very moment, you have the power to change your life. You are the creator of your reality.
Manifesting. It's real, guys.
I believe that that you can speak things into existence.
I talked about the law of attraction.
If you can see it here, and you have the courage enough to speak it, it will happen.
The biggest lesson I learned from the Tates is that you are in control of your own mind. The power of hypnotizing yourself.
You make everybody else accept your version of reality. You see a version of yourself inside of your mind, and when other people do not see it when they look at you, you bend space-time and change your outward projection, your avatar, so others view you exactly the way you see yourself.
You could create enough of a visualization for yourself if you really were to powerfully start to focus on it and do that and build that ability to visualize something that your brain at one point would have to think it's so true that the world would meet you and put it into your life.
These ideas tend to exist in a space alongside the more accepted pursuits of masculine culture, the gym, professional sports, but they also cross-contaminate with some more questionable knowledge. There's the avoiding of ultra-processed foods.
People have been arrested and just locked up for having whole milk.
The demonization of feminism.
Oh, I'm an independent. I don't need no man because I have an OnlyFans and men pay my OnlyFans. And if anyone comes up to me, I'll call a male police officer. I don't need men. Shut up.
Conspiracy theories. All of these are far more damaging, but we can see how going to the gym has become synonymous with some more fringe ideas and conservatism more generally, which is a rejection of modernity.
But sometimes I look up, I feel there's like a thing. I don't know what it is, bro. I don't think it's gay or anything. I think it just feel like the space is looking back at me.
There is something much more sinister that is percolating in this space, and it is a type of right-wing thought that is conservative, but not one that wants to go back to the 1950s, one that wants to go back to the Bronze Age. It was once said that every staffer in the Trump White House had read Bronze Age Mindset, a book written pseudonymously by Bronze Age Pervert, often referred to affectionately on platforms such as X as BAP. Now, even if this is an exaggeration, the book and its ideas have so many high-profile supporters.
But Politico, I think, does not do justice to the actual genius. I mean, I think it's actually quite brilliant, much of Bronze Age mindset and as much as I disagree with a lot of it, and I think a lot of it is offensive and terrible and gross, you can't deny that it's incredibly well-structured and well-written.
Mainstream right-wing commentators like Richard Hanania and Christopher Rufo have both shown admiration for BAP's work. BAP's Twitter account is followed by Vice President of the United States J.D. Vance. Michael Anton, the newly appointed policy director at the State Department, positively reviewed the book for the Claremont Institute after receiving it as a gift from Curtis Yarvin. Darren Beattie, a former Trump aide who got fired for speaking at a white nationalist conference, is also a big fan. And while Elon Musk has never tweeted about BAP, I'd bet money that he does before the end of 2026. So what is this book about? What makes it so appealing that so many people have read it? First and foremost, if you are a young man, this book is a fun read because it is written like a 4chan post. It's very crass, it's offensive. And the content can be fun too. There's a lot of discussion around what it means to be hot.
Beautiful and strong. Always be the best and excel over all the rest. The left, which seeks not the deification of mankind or of man, but its debasement into cockroach form.
But that is, of course, all a shield, so that if anyone asks you, like, oh, why do you like this book? You can just be like, oh, it's ironic, it's fun. But privately, you can still take it very seriously. Because of the way the book is written, it's actually kind of hard to explain what it is exactly about. It's like a strange diatribe that simultaneously praises the pre-modern world, specifically Greece, and critiques the modern world, specifically racial and gender equality and evolutionary science, among other things, while also offering some self-help tidbits. And obviously, there is, of course, a lot of talk about what it means to be a real man. Despite writing like a 4chaner and insisting that the book is not philosophy, it is clear that BAP views himself as knowledgeable when it comes to philosophy and theory. In fact, the writing style is what I assume to be a modern play on Nietzsche's writing style. He wants Bronze Age Pervert to be understood as a Nietzschean, Schopenhauerian, Straussian deconstruction of the modern world. And I know that many fans of BAP, and BAP himself, would strongly reject what I am about to say, but whether intentional or not, he is reproducing the ideas of Julius Evola. Who is Evola? You are not going to like him. Evola was an Italian esoteric philosopher and occultist. Evola is associated with traditionalism, a school of thought that believes that a divine piece of truth, a wisdom about the universe was given to mankind in ancient times, and every single religion developed from that truth. Then modernity caused us to forget the truth, and as a result, we have been plunged into decadence and darkness. Therefore, modernity is the enemy. Luckily, traditionalism, Evola's school of thought, endorses a cyclical view of history, one taken from Hinduism instead of a linear one, meaning that in order to go back, we just have to keep pushing forward. Evola believed that in this time cycle, we were in the last stage, known as Kali Yuga.
Welcome to the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga.
Yeah,
Enjoy
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Well, we were talking about that before, and that's kind of where we're at. We are in Kali Yuga.
We are in Kali Yuga.
And the Hindus were very smart in their idea of, it was the Hindus, right?
Yes, the Hindus, yes.
They came up with this idea that there are certain ages, almost unavoidable, of civilization.
Correct.
So they go through these cycles.
Correct.
And Kali Yuga is characterized by violent conflict and the end of the world as we know it. It's kind of similar to the beliefs held by accelerationists who believe that the world is already in the process of collapsing under the weight of its own contradiction. So the best thing to do is to speed it up so it falls apart. Then we can get cracking on starting all over. Evola rose to prominence during World War II, and he did interface with both Mussolini and Hitler, but he didn't really like either of them because he didn't like their fascism. In his mind, his fascism was far more pure, much more spiritually based. So in Mussolini's Italy, Essentially, because the fascism appealed to a populism and religion, he felt that that tainted fascism. Evola believed in a spiritual caste system. He believed that some people were better than other people, therefore appealing to the masses, fundamentally wrong. Then in Germany, he felt that the Third Reich was too scientific in their racial discrimination, in their Holocaust, because he felt that the issue with victims of the regime should not be one of race or politics. It's that they were spiritually bad, that their spiritual essence was lesser. And he was obsessed with the idea of the spirit, in particular the warrior spirit. Even after the end of World War II, the defeat of fascism, he tried to bring it back. He was tried in court for advocating for the revival of fascism, but he missed the charge because technically, he was never a member of Mussolini's fascist party, a party he didn't join because they were not fascist enough. Evola wrote a book called Revolt Against the Modern World, in which he diagnoses all of the problems of the modern West. Funnily enough, his complaints are very similar to the right-wing intelligentsia today, in that liberalism has led to the degradation of higher values and ideals in favor of atheism and materialism, mob rule, hedonism, scientism, gender ideology, and race mixing. And if we are going to save civilization, we need to recenter spiritual pursuits. If you read Revolt Against the Modern World by Evola and Bronze Age Mindset by BAP side by side, the influence will be obvious. Like Evola, BAP believes that there is a spiritual caste system, that those who belong to the lower caste, which BAP refers to as bugmen, need to be purified. Members of the lower caste are spoken of with absolute hatred by both writers. Both have a contempt for Enlightenment values in Christianity. Both believe that the ancient key to human vitality and potential has been lost. Both books open with the author insisting that only superior minds will be able to understand their ideas. And just like Evola, the stock standard fascism is simply too populist and too democratic for BAP, who writes, I believe in fascism, or something worse, I believe in rule by a military caste of men who would be able to guide society toward a morality of eugenics. Something important that I think is worth mentioning is Evola's early preoccupation with an idea that he called the absolute individual. It's kind of similar to Nietzsche's Übermensch. It's basically the idea of a man who has the ability to be whatever he wants to be through the power of his mind and will alone. Eventually, this willpower will become so strong that not only will he be able to change himself, but he will also be able to change the world. Evola wrote, one could envision a gradual process whereby the power of an eye expands from being the power of thought to that of a magical imagination and self-persuasion, to that of persuading others and ultimately persuading and altering reality itself. And that is actually very similar to what BAP is talking about when he talks about the Bronze Age mindset. Ultimately, it all comes back to the power of positive thinking. Another fan of Julius Evola's ideas is Richard Spencer.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Infamous alt-right leader who has said that Evola is one of the most interesting men of the 20th century. I don't believe that Richard Spencer has read Julius Evola, but that doesn't really matter because he's bringing him up for a reason.
We're really trying to change the world, and we're going to do that by changing consciousness and changing how people see the world and how they see themselves.
There are sections of the alt-right that honestly believe what they are doing is magic. They are actively engaged in something called chaos magic, which conceptually exists somewhere between witchcraft and pickup artistry. But chaos magic itself developed in the 1970s during a time where the culture actively rejected the idea that something could be true, or fact, or reality. This period of time was ruled by the idea that symbols and systems don't have meaning. Meaning comes exclusively from belief. Therefore, the truth is whatever you believe. Chaos magic believes that we can use our minds, individually and collectively, to change the world. Reality is a playground. Chaos magic likes to focus on extending what we believe is possible for us to affect. What would it take to nudge the universe in the direction you want it to go? Maybe something as trivial as the image of a frog could change the world forever if enough people believed that it meant something more. PePe began his life in a 2005 comic book called The Boys Club. By 2010, PePe was a popular meme. In 2016, PePe went bad. He started being used on the message board 4chan as a visual way to indicate that something was politically incorrect. Misogyny, fascism, racism, all accompanied by a PePe. PePe was being shared wearing swastikas and saying slurs. The ADL classified PePe as a hate symbol. But around this time, someone noticed a coincidence. In the ancient Egyptian world, the god of chaos and darkness was depicted by a frog named Kek.
The god Kek, who's a frog, by who's a frog, as it turns out.
But the coincidence didn't end there, because kek was a phrase used in place of lol by World of Warcraft MPG players, many of whom already a fan of PePe. This is of course all completely meaningless in reality. Many things are just a coincidence, but this coincidence was given spiritual significance. PePe became a sigil to these people, an entity created and fed by the devotion of his followers for magical purposes. It is so stupid, I know, and I'm sorry. It gets worse. On the website 4chan, posts are given sequential ID numbers that are hard to predict given the volume of posting. The members of 4chan treat patterns and repetitions in these numbers as auspicious. It's very similar to the way that girls get excited when it's 11:11. Because these numbers were seen as special, people would go out of their way to try and get them. And in 2015, a lot of posts that were trying to get these 4chan angel numbers were posts about Trump or PePe. One day, someone's post appears with the number 7777777. That's 7 sevens. It doesn't get more auspicious than that. That post said Donald Trump will win the election. So from that day forth, it became law that Donald Trump had been divinely selected by the god of chaos Kek to rule the United States of America. On the 13th of October 2015, Donald Trump retweeted an image of himself depicted as PePe. For months, people in this 4chan community tried to manifest harm against Hillary Clinton using the PePe, and when she fell down at the 9/11 memorial service, they took responsibility. Was it a joke? Well, yes and no. In the same way that BAP is joking, I'm not joking. In the same way that Trump himself is simultaneously ridiculous and very serious. It doesn't really matter though, because whether they were joking or not, they were going out of their way to do the esoteric practice of harnessing the power of intention and mental energy to produce a real-world result. Links between online memes and real-world events are, to these people, interpreted as magic. While the alt-writers on 4chan were doing magic, the people of Frog Twitter were discussing the merits of Baathism. In a very broad sense, Frog Twitter was a collection of people who opposed Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and wanted to change the institutions that supported them. Actual Frog Twitter in the early days was an extremely closed, hierarchical group led by two figures, Frogdad and Mina. They discussed all kinds of fringe intellectual projects, but once Trump takes office, the nature of Frog Twitter changes dramatically. Some members leave, some are banned from the platform, a schism occurs, and a new leader emerges for Frog Twitter, none other than Bronze Age Pervert himself. Under the reign of BAP, the nature of Frog Twitter completely changes. The original members of Frog Twitter were pushed out, and BAP used the community to promote himself, his book, his ideas, BAPism, and the right-wing esotericism associated with it. Frog Twitter became dominated by e-girls, Tradcat's semi-famous posters. It became mainstream. Even Elon Musk was a member of Frog Twitter. The Frog Twitter that started as a more intellectual debate meme rejection of Hillary Clinton morphed into a crypto-fueled e-girl run BAPfest. Why have I given you this incredibly dense history of Frog Twitter? The changes we see in Frog Twitter are the same changes we see between the two Trump administrations. The online mind willed the new administration into power, and the greater centering of Evola is a part of his administration. In 2014, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's campaign manager, gave a speech at a Vatican function. People who are familiar with traditionalism and other forms of right-wing esoteric philosophy were shocked to hear him name drop Julius Evola. He did so while talking about how Vladimir Putin cultivates his personal political power. Bannon said he's got an advisor who harkens back to Julius Evola and different writers of the early 20th century who are really supporters of what's called the Traditionalist movement, which really eventually metastasized into Italian fascism. A lot of people that are traditionalists are attracted to that. I think that people, particularly in certain countries, want to see the sovereignty for their country. They want to see nationalism for their country. We, the Judeo-Christian West, really have to look at what he's talking about as far as traditionalism goes, particularly the sense of where it supports the underpinnings of nationalism. And I happen to think that the individual sovereignty of a country is a good thing and a strong thing.
Because I believe the world, and particularly the Judeo-Christian West, is in a crisis. And I believe that, hundreds of years from now, when they look back, and we are children of that barbarity, that this will be looked at as almost a new dark age.
It was shocking for someone so close to the President of the United States to name and discuss the ideas of a man like Julius Evola. We also know that in 2018, Bannon had an 8-hour-long meeting with the most famous living supporter of Julius Evola, Aleksandr Dugin.
We in Russia, we could use postmodernity in order to explain to the West that if any truth is relative, So we have our special Russian truth that you need to accept as something that maybe is not your truth.
Even if it's not true.
But if the truth is relative.
Aleksandr Dugin, often referred to as the modern Rasputin, has called for a genuine, true, radical, revolutionary, and consistently fascist fascism. Conservatives do not want change. Traditionalists want lots of change very fast. They want to get the train to jump the tracks. But how do you get the train to jump the tracks? In 2018, Benjamin Teitelbaum interviewed Steve Bannon for his book, War on Eternity. And Teitelbaum was very brave. He asked Bannon point blank if he was a traditionalist. And Bannon's response was coy. It was neither a full-hearted confirmation or a flat-out denial. Instead, he hesitated and then said, it depends on what you mean. Teitelbaum is an expert in these more esoteric philosophies, so knowing that Bannon wasn't willing to come out and say it, Teitelbaum listened for clues in what Bannon was saying. At one point during the discussion, Bannon referred to Donald Trump as a man in time, a phrase that Teitelbaum clocked immediately as originating from a more obscure traditionalist text. This phrase comes from a French traditionalist known as Savitri Devi. She is the author of a book called The Lightning and the Sun, and she basically tried to turn the Third Reich into a religion, which she called esoteric Hitlerism. Like all traditionalists, this woman believed that time was cyclical and that violence and aggression would accelerate an age, which would lead to spiritual renewal. But she also believed that certain special individuals could play a role in the process of cycling through an age. And these special people come in three forms: a man in time, a man above time, and a man against time. It is interesting that Bannon would use the phrase a man in time to refer to Trump. They are exterminators without an ideology. They are not aware that they are such men. In fact, they are often not curious or prone to self-reflection. They pursue self-interest with such ruthlessness that they themselves become a harmful force. When asked, Bannon said he wasn't familiar with the work. But when the ideas were explained to him, he did say he found them very interesting. So if we believe Teitelbaum, that Bannon did say this phrase, we have two options. We can view it as a mere coincidence that the phrase was used. Or we can view it as an intentional invocation of a concept used in the foundational text of esoteric Nazism, which claims a person is actively trying to destroy society in the hopes of bringing a new age upon us. Whether or not Trump sees himself as some sort of chaos magician or spiritual warrior, it doesn't really matter. It is clear that the people around him see him as more than just a politician. Without suggesting that any of this is done with any sort of intentionality, this might be why rational approaches to this administration seem to consistently fall short. In the same way that it is difficult to convince an anti-vaxxer that they are putting their child in danger, it is hard to explain to people that Donald Trump will not help them politically. A large section of the American population is engaged in magical thinking, and because his entire administration is justified using a completely different kind of thinking, it is difficult to rationally convince someone that Trump is not acting in the interests of the American people. His illuminated politics are destructive in a way that we've never really seen before, and we are experiencing our first truly irrational presidency. The only thing that gives me hope is that I know, whether half of America believes it or not, magic is not real. This is me trying to explain the magic trick. Enjoy the Kali Yuga.
We're coming up with the answers for autism. You watch. We're coming up with the answers for other things that normal people, regular people, easy to get along with people wouldn't be able to do. He's got a lot of ideas, and so do I, and we're going to clean it up.
No ordinary man was ever elected president of the United States. And that's pretty much true. But even an extraordinary man can do unusual things.